So a lot has changed, and a lot has not changed. Everything was separate. Very few things were equal. The bus stations had separate waiting rooms, but there were separate libraries, all of this. And this was all deemed appropriate by the government. And there was an insidious creeping of psychological abuse, I think, all of the time that I was here. And that is why I left the day after I graduated. And came back only because I had an aging mother. But things have gotten better, I have to say, in some cases. You know, the current administration is not helping. I see it. So I think there's a lot of work to do. And I think Black Lives Matter came into existence because there are so many things that indicate to a lot of people that Black lives don't matter. And so I think that is why they are. And young people that just never knew what we went through to start with, but they just see it in the moment and say, well, this surely cannot be. So I think there are a lot of changes that are happening and some more that need to happen.
Now, did you graduate from Williston?
Oh, yes.
Williston.
Williston, the greatest school under the sun. That was one of the bright lights in our lives. We had teachers who knew the situation when we were leaving, knew what we were going to be met with. So they always said to us, you know, you have got to be 10 times better than white people to be equal, if you're equal then. So that is what people like Bertha Todd, who is almost our last living one, instilled in us, because we had textbooks that were used with pages torn out, and all kinds of things that were used and non-existent. And we had to overcome that. And our teachers made sure that we did. And we ended up with the best education that I think anybody could have had anywhere. So I think the separate but equal society was never equal. But I think there has been an effort to balance the playing field some. The statues coming down to me was encouraging. You know, there were over 260 white Southerners who died in the Civil War. There were over 360 Northerners who died. And the issue is, of course, the Civil War was a war fought against the United States of America because of the slavery situation. Mm-hmm. And while I understand perfectly what people who mourn their ancestors feel, I do. I really can't help but feel it. Sure. But what folks need to realize is their ancestors were trying to make sure that my ancestors stayed in bondage or were killed or were ripped apart from their families. So I think things need to be put in the right light, and to glorify this, to me, is a mistake, and it contributes to the psychological abuse that people who grew up here have. It's just kind of inside of you, and sometimes you don't even know it. Mm-hmm. The K-Fit Country Club, now that 17th Street is cleared, I can go by and glance over at the country club, but it has no black members. Mm-hmm. You know, the Wilmington Club across the street here. Mm-hmm. But all of these things were just a way of life for us, and it didn't even make us realize what was going on. As I said, our teachers helped us, and then we left. And when we left, we could see what could have been here. So for a long time, we didn't know it. The things that we knew were more obvious, like you couldn't eat at the lunch counter. It was more obvious than the statue. It all tied together in the end. But those types of things, you couldn't try on clothes. Black people couldn't. So all of these things were the things, there were so many things you could not do. We could be here all day. Mm-hmm. But because I got away, I was able to look back and see what was so very wrong. And that is another part of the reason I came back, to try to see if there was something I could do to make a little bit of difference in this town, and maybe try to be up and coming. Mm-hmm. And clean cut as I could be. My friends still can't believe it. To start this program to help old people. And so our lives have all been so mixed up with emotions as to what's right, what's wrong, why was it right, why was it wrong, what do we do now? Do we accept it now that I'm old, I'm 74, do I just let it go? Or what? And I am so encouraged to see younger people who are questioning some things. And I sometimes question their not their motives, but their ways of doing things, which is all a part of the struggle. All of the things you see going on are a part of the struggle. And if you have to make a difference, you have to be a certain way. You have to do certain things that you may not want to do. You have to have credibility, or nothing works. It can't be all emotion. You have to have your facts in order. And I am proud to see the folks who are doing it. And of course, to have multiple races of people is nothing new. White people, Jews always participated in sit-ins way back in the 50s and the 60s. So that is really nothing new. It's just come in my mind full circle.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I hope people will realize that this is a time that needs to be examined. All of this is not going on without reason, that things need to be examined, and that people can sit down and talk about it. And really talk about it, not just black people, but white people who were Civil War descendants. I'd like to sit down with them and talk about it, because nothing is going to change until we start the conversation. And you need to make good trouble sometimes, but you need to do it in the right way to get the effect that you want and to get the outcome that you want. You got to get out and vote. You got to do more than march. So you got to get down in those proverbial trenches. And let's sit down and talk about this. If we fight, we fight. Meet on neutral ground and talk about some of these things, because some of the things are very troubling. I think right always prevails. And some people believe right is one thing, and some people believe right is other things. But right, I think, always prevails in the end. I've had people who have come up to me in a church at the beach, and a little old lady came up one time. I had made a presentation, and she came up to me and she said, "You spoke so well, you're so articulate." Well, that immediately said to me, she didn't expect me to be articulate. Where she was just really giving me kudos, saying, "You really," and she didn't think about what it was going to mean to me. And that's what everybody's got to think about. What is this going to mean to the other person? And it just is an interesting place to be at this point in my life. It really is interesting to sit back and watch the young folks. And I see some of the mistakes they're making, and they're going to make them. We made them too. But I have hope that in the end, and I hope that's not forever from now, that things are going to get better. They may not get superb, but I think they can get better. I hope they're not discouraged when things don't happen as fast as they want, because it took 100 years for us to get to this point in this city. From 1898, 120 years to get here. So we have got bad history, and we can kind of lay around and wallow around in the fact that we had a bad history, or we can do something about changing some of the things. Mm-hmm. And I think the changes that are coming, while they can be scary for some people, both probably black people and white people, it can be scary. They are long overdue.